This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Our school system kind of teaches you to be afraid of failure, which I think is so counterintuitive for business. Failure is like a huge teacher. That's how I learn. I learned by I failed and I understand causation. Why did I fail? And I have a more physical reaction to it.
I love it when I get to bring friends on. And to be honest, I find it fascinating that for most people, friend has become like a 4-letter word when you talk about the way we work with people. It's like, no, you have your work life and your business life, your home life. And it's like sometimes some people are really wonky about letting people into their lives, But I mean, I remember you sitting in my office early days and you were like, it's go time. And I mean, I didn't know that you were like, it's go time at that moment because I'm running my own business. But to think back to about, gosh, it must have been 8 years ago ish. And you were ready to roll. And I'm psyched that my buddy James Heller's here, CEO, founder of Wrapify, girl dad, which is cool. I want to hear how that's changed you because you have been on a mission, and this podcast is for all, but it's always enjoyable when I see other people that live in my hometown or my where I live now who are like, this ain't about San Diego. This is just one pond and there's a lot more. And you've been living it for a while. So congrats, first of all, on your journey. I know you're still in it. I know you're in the thick of it. How would you describe it so far?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's been an 8-year journey. You were one of my first agency meetings at the very beginnings of Wrapify when we were like a pre-seed company. And we're now, the leader in a space we essentially created. Rideshare advertising didn't really exist then. But yeah, we went from creating a category. It wasn't even just creating a company. It was creating a category, pushing media measurement and attribution in the out-of-home space. And now that is a movement across a bunch of different subcategories of out-of-home. So it's not just wrapping vehicles and putting ads on vehicles, but it's everything: billboards, transit. And so it's been hard. It hasn't been easy. And you throw in some global events and pandemics and Russia and all these other things. And it just makes it more, not much more interesting, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart. I've aged considerably in the last 8 years. I'd say they've been like dog years. They're not, they're definitely more human years, but lots of changes. I mean, I went from being a single guy on the road to being a father of two and still running a company and still continuing to develop this category and scale a venture-backed company.
Curious question, and I think I know the answer because we're cut similarly, other than I have no hair, and I think you still have a full head back under there, right?
Still pretty hairy guy.
You're good. You're in a good spot. But when you're an entrepreneur, like you said, the shifts from when you started to now, you're responsible for other humans. I would have my will to succeed is real, and if that meant this is before wife and children, me sleeping on a couch in a small room with no windows, and that's what it would take. And it's almost like ridiculous levels of radical focus, right, on a thing, and everything else is backburnered. Is that how you feel? If you go back to the beginning, did you have that, or were you in a better place than I was?
Oh no, I definitely had that probably to the nth degree. I mean, it was put everything on the back burner, including physical and mental health. I mean, it was not sleeping, all-nighters, using substances to keep yourself awake, to grind, sleeping on the floor at JFK. doing all that, being on the road 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. Yeah, and going from 0 to 1 is such a different journey than going from like 1 to 10, right? So it's different, and I think that your where are you at in your personal journey, or I think your age and the amount of wick you have it needs to align with that. And also being a first time venture back founder versus like you have a different vantage point because you have blind optimism and you don't know what it's like to raise institutional capital. Like you don't know what it's like to raise angel. So now I have like the hindsight of raising $13.6 million. That then it was like, I'm gonna go and raise like blind, go out into the world and raise capital for this brand new category that has almost no comps, right? So very different, right? Totally different job. So the job evolves, and the definition of what's hard also like changes every year.
So for anyone listening that's never raised money now, like if you were going to give them one piece of advice, what would the advice be?
The word no doesn't mean anything. In business, it means nothing. Like, and most investors are visionless. So expecting them to have vision is kind of a waste. The best investors are really good pattern recognizers. And so if you're building something that doesn't really align with a pattern that exists, or at least in recent history, or there isn't like FOMO over a new category that's got a lot of other people investing money into, even though it might not be a very profitable category in the long run, like those two things don't necessarily align. So I think it's persistence is your number one. Persistence and focus are your two most critical strengths as a founder.
I've take a ton of, if I'm listening to this, I take a ton of confidence from your response because there's so much fear and doubt already, right? Like, who's going to give me money, or like, how do you do that? Or I don't know that. They have something that I need and want and don't totally understand how to grab. And I think just giving them that little nugget of like, no isn't really no in this scenario. It's a no until it's a yes or a maybe. And let's call it what it is. Like there is the pendulum, and you look at your career of when was this a courageous move versus when was this a resilient move, and you kind of nailed it. Like blind optimism, it is courageous to blaze a new path, cliche fully intended, in a space that no one's taken on, but then life happens to you. See pandemic, see shit happening all over the world, right? And it's like, how do you respond to that? An investor says no at first, right? Or says, I don't know, no, right? It's like, how do you just not hear no and keep moving forward? So I hear, a lot of courageous moves for you, and then I hear a lot of resilient moves for you. Give me like what you felt was the most courageous move for you on the journey so far, and give me what has been the most resilient move we've seen from you.
I think San Diego breeds a culture of cockroach founders. I call them cockroaches, not in a negative sense, but that we're just unkillable. We and it's changed quite a bit. Like when we first started raising capital in 8 years ago, there was this thing called like the San Diego discount, meaning if you were a venture backed startup in San Diego, you weren't serious. You weren't in the Bay, you weren't in New York, you weren't in LA, you weren't in a tier one market. So you were getting discounted for that. That's changed a lot. We've got some really amazing companies that have newly minted unicorns, companies like ClickUp, for example, here in town, outside of the biotech and life science ecosystem. So I think so that was a positive impact that the pandemic created, and that people realize, well, this is a great place. This is the best place to live.
Totally.
And you can run a company from here and attract amazing talent because why wouldn't you want to live here? So I think that's changed quite a bit. But going back to your earlier question of like what was the most courageous versus resilient, I mean, I was working for a Fortune 50, pretty cushy job on a trajectory to climbing the ladder at a 24,000 employee company. I didn't, I would have made substantially more money for myself if I just stuck that route in the last 8 years. Like I just now am back to like where I was when I first started Wrapify. So that was in terms of like cash compensation. On the resilience front, I mean, there have been, I call it like, well, I don't just call it this, but there's the trough of sorrow that every founder goes through. And I think you go through like several troughs. And I think I've gone through like 3 of these cycles. The first one was we were at the very top, like the face of the Forbes 30 under 30 for marketing, raised our first institutional capital. Like we were growing in triple digit quarter over quarter, unstoppable. Let's go scale a sales org in this category. And we embarked on a thesis that turned out to be a total failure. It was too early. We hired the wrong archetype of sales people, and revenue went to 0 within like 6 months. Like went from like hero to 0 in 6 months, and then had to rebuild all that. And then so that was like the first big like wave. The second was just learning about who you want to join you on this journey from a founder perspective. I started Wrapify with 3 co-founders. Today there's 1 founder.
Wow.
And so a big part of that was also just not understanding what founder means in the beginning versus like having an early stage employee who wants to be a part of it, but isn't really willing to do the founder grind. So that's just, learning a lot about who you are as a person and also who other people are, right? You learn a lot about who somebody is when they join you in business, for better or for worse. The second, I think, in terms of courageous, was surviving pandemic. I mean, being in media in general, during selling media and ads during one of the most historical downturns in recorded history, was really, really challenging. We had kind of a slingshot effect of that, where 2020 was rough, but because so much large format out of home and out of home media that was in city centers and places where people just weren't anymore because they're working from home, that actually had like kind of a slingshot effect in terms of we were one of the only out of home platforms that could allow you to scale media in neighborhoods on a national scale. So 2021 ended up being actually our biggest year ever. So we had this like really, really, really challenging time to like boom. And then as soon as media started flowing back into all those traditional channels in 2022, it was like, okay, well, we now are established media format. We are now a line item on the plan with these large agencies. We're starting to grow that. It took us 8 years to get there. So that was the that, and just making sure you're keeping cash in the bank for an ad tech startup during a period of time where ad tech was not a favorable category in venture. Those 3 things I think are like the 3 troughs of sorrow.
I feel like out of home and ad techs don't always get put in the same bucket either, right? But right now, out of home is, I mean, look, I'm sure you have your numbers. I read somewhere it's like 38 billion is projected as the market for out of home in the US in 23.
Global.
That's global.
US is just touching 9 billion.
Okay.
In
That's
the
not
US.
small.
It's not big. I would say the TAM, well, let's just put this into perspective. I think, and I definitely fact check me on this, but I think bot traffic, like fake ads that aren't being seen by people, make up 35 billion in the US.
Okay.
So like fake ads that nobody sees are 3 times the TAM that real ads that have been around for longer than any other category of advertising that people can't block. So that to me is bonkers, and I think that's something that is changing. I think out of home is it's out of home is one of the fastest growing categories right now because of that, because of what's going on in the digital ecosystem.
Well, I also think, like you said, we've all been holed up for so long. Like last night, I was at Coldplay, and it was, I will love their show. Actually, at some point, I want to get them on this podcast. The only question I really want to ask them is like, when you make music now, are you writing songs just to perform them? Because like that's where the business really is. Like they're now it's experiential, or are you writing songs that need to be rocket ships on the radio? But the point of this is like when I think of your product in a world that's moving more into experiential, holy shit! Like this sure seems like it would be a good time to be Wrapify.
I think that this is it took us 8 years to arrive. I think we had a 2-year pause because of what happened, global, like pandemic wise. That kind of was just we nobody could have predicted that. Uh, but yeah, and by the way, I heard that Coldplay concert was pretty amazing. I heard a handful of people were like, "This is one of the best concerts I've been to." So yeah, I think that right now is a really interesting time for out of home for a couple reasons. One of them is we have so many digitally native marketers that grew up, and I'm one of them. That like cut their teeth in SEO, SEM, and last click attribution and top of the funnel brand and media measurement all the way through to the end with one platform was not really a thing. We bought stuff because we could measure it all the way through to like last click conversion. And that is kind of going away with like the cookieless future, the changes that Google's made, the changes that Facebook has made. The audience targeting that we had 3 years ago on Facebook, which was really cool, we don't have today. And I've talked to marketers about that very subject where they're like, hey, we can't even do this, and we don't have a strong brand. We know that having brand will make our digital more performant. So that by itself is like propelling more out of home.
Hold on. Do you think that statement, like what percent of marketers do you truly believe they think that we're deficient in brand right now? Like, and I know you're talking to a wide slew of brands, and you're not talking to small brands either. Let's be realistic. But like, do you think that? Because I'm not seeing that right now. I think you know where I stand on brand as a proponent, as a guy that you got to go to couragebrands.com. But like,
Sure.
do you really feel like people are seeing now, or oh shit, like brand matters again?
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with a VP of brand for a pretty large company that's headquartered here in San Diego. And they're like, yeah, we are now at the point of diminishing returns on Google and Facebook. And it's getting so expensive that not having something to create recall before the digital is deployed is actually like costing us money. We need to front load that. Like it's not just brand and just mid funnel and last click. It's how do all these things work together to increase performance, and how do we measure it all together? That has been really hard to do historically. The parts are now on the table to do that efficiently across all these different media categories, including out of home. I think that's what's so important about this time in out of home, and in media in general, is we have this like the smart brands, the brands that are going to capitalize on this time. To me, there's a couple things that are really working in their advantage. One, not all CMOs and VPs of marketing and brand marketers and just marketers in general are subscribing to that mission yet. And I think you could get a lot of media at a huge discount right now because of that. So you could capitalize on the time in terms of how far you could stretch your dollar across some of these channels like digital out of home and out of home, traditional out of home media. I think that there's also like how you use that to make your digital more performant is also a different way of thinking about it than just like top of the funnel brand awareness by itself. And so those are like I think the brands that are capitalizing on that right now are going to get a lot more in 2024 than the ones that are just like trying to refine their Facebook, Google, and Amazon direct budgets.
Are you seeing when you go in and convey Wrapify, do you put yourself in the out of home bucket, or do you put yourself somewhere else?
It depends on who we're talking to. If we're talking to a CMO, brand direct, it's really more of a digital product that has an out of home component. When we're talking to an out of home agency, we're an out of home product.
Right.
Because they can't, well, they can't buy digital, and that's not how they think. But so our message to the out of home shop is more distilled down to high recall out of home deployed on rideshare vehicles. When we're talking to brands direct, we're really talking more about using high recall out of home to trigger digital and how it makes your digital more performant, how those things work together. There's also just the layering of different media platforms and how they work together really well. Like, I think right now is a really interesting time for buying linear television and out of home at the same time, because they're so inexpensive. And for just certain categories, for specific demographics. Then there's also, like, you could trigger connected TV with the audience exposure from out of home today. We do it. That's a big value prop, not just for Wrapify, but for out of home in general.
You know, I'm just trying to think about right now. There's probably someone who's listening to this in the car that could actually get their car wrapped. I'm like, oh shit, I don't actually think I gave James the opportunity to like layman down Wrapify. So let's take a step back. Give the 1 minute cliff notes for, let's say someone's not in media, right? Give
Sure.
them the 1 minute on Wrapify.
Yeah. So Wrapify is a leader in mobility and rideshare advertising, and we're really a two-sided marketplace. We have 550,000 plus gig workers, and that includes rideshare drivers, folks that do Uber, Lyft, Instacart, DoorDash. So gig workers that do app-enabled delivery and rideshare, and they want to make extra income for the driving they already do. This also includes just people that want to monetize their commute. You don't have to be a gig worker, professional gig worker, to do this. But for the most part, the vast majority of our driver base makes up is mostly Uber, Lyfts, Instacart, DoorDash. And we're a way to provide incremental income by having your vehicle wrapped in advertising. On the brand side of our platform, we're a high performance out of home product that has media measurement, attribution, data visualization, all the things you'd expect from a digital ad platform like a Facebook ads or a Google ads, but in the out of home space. So you can log into a dashboard, you can see heat maps, impression data. We have patents on how we measure things that move in the out of home space. And that's really like what put us on the map. We were one of the first to do that. And then we can actually tell the brand, okay, of the folks exposed to these vehicles in these markets, they're X percentage more likely to go to your website, to complete a checkout, and get really granular, all the way down to like the SKU of a specific product. Download your app, walk into a physical retail environment. And so those are like, it's more about high performance, measurable out of home. That's really, really high recall. It's the highest recall according to Nielsen. And also we're a gig platform that operates in the same space as Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and Instacart and all these other gig working services. But the difference is we're really more of a bolt on to those things versus a primary source of income.
But if I want to go get my car wrapped, I can still do that. What's that process like?
Yeah, so you download the Wrapify app. You make sure location services are turned on. We use that to create a profile for where you're typically driving and when a campaign becomes available in your market. So you live in San Diego and you live in North County. If there's a campaign available, we recently had one on the road for a global payments product called Wise. We also have done some work with some of the local brands here in San Diego as well. If you want that brand on your vehicle, you see the duration, what your typical earnings are going to be on a biweekly basis. You opt into that. We schedule you with one of our network installers. You get your car wrapped and on the road, and then you earn on a per mile basis. And you're typically earning anywhere from a few $100s. And if you're leveraging things like Swarm, you could earn substantially more than that. So it's a bolt on. It's a way to create some extra income for somebody who's on the road a lot.
1 minute on Swarm. What's that?
So you mentioned experiential. It's the more experiential component of our product, in that where a brand, say they want to swarm a ballpark like Petco Park. It's a way to get vehicles driving around the road segments that circumvent a point of interest, like a stadium. When we work with telco brands, they want the service areas of those retail storefronts, marketing, big events, that kind of stuff.
How creative? First of all, before I get to the question, it's cool to have watched, and I know you're 8 years in and you're resilient yourself. So to see all the iterations, all the like, oh shit, okay, that's it. Okay. Oh, there's the next one. Here we go. The pivots. Is there an opportunity like, oh, this campaign requires speed. Let's go to sports cars. Let's go find and pinpoint all the sports cars in this market. Or like, oh, this is a big message, but it would be more creative done on small minis. Like, are you able to get that precise at this point with cars?
No. I mean, yes, but does it provide any value to the brand? No. The reality is this is a reach and frequency play. We're not putting one or two vehicles. We're putting like hundreds of vehicles on the road in multi-market scenarios. And so the value prop to the brand is we're the glue between your out of home and digital. We're like we live in that middle. We're like the thing that stitches all those together. So if you're buying large format out of home or transit, we're able to target places where there is no out of home and continue that messaging. And it's a different type of reach and frequency. On so it's really a high recall reach and frequency play and less a stunty experiential media product. Segmenting to different vehicle types and all that stuff, it just bogs down the onboarding process. Yes, we've done stuff like that in the past, and it's a bear every single time.
As an entrepreneur now, like you've had all these learnings. Again, let's say, and I love asking this question, so it's a repeater for the guests, but like this version of James today, James, if you could say one thing to, I would have slept on my couch, right, and nothing else matters, James. What is the one piece of advice or even like vote of confidence would you tell yourself? Like this James sitting right here to that James, what would you say?
Pick an industry that has a much larger TAM than 9 billion. I think is what I would have told myself then. Because even though we're fighting for such a small piece of the pie, this is an industry that, while they talk about wanting to grow and wanting to, bring innovation into the fold, the reality is a handful of holding co's and a handful of large format out of home players control the lion's share of media spend in this category, and they really don't want that to change. And they intentionally are blocking growth in a lot of ways. So it's like you could go full bore to try to create a new category, but if the TAM for that category is really small, you're fighting for such a small piece of it. So I probably would have the James today would have sat down with James 8 years ago and said, hey, this is cool, you probably could do this, but you could probably take all that grind and put it into a TAM that's 10 times that and have a much larger outcome.
Okay. Ryan today, I'm not sure if Ryan back then, but Ryan today's number one personal value is optimism. So like, let's put a positive spin on this. So like, let's look at like the top three learnings so far. And this isn't, I mean, you get to answer this any way you want, right? So
Sure.
It could be, James, as you progress through life, not Wrapify, but life, what are the three sort of like, wow, I learned this about me and I will always take this forward with me, whether it's at Wrapify or you go after $100 billion market. What's the takeaway?
The takeaway, so to takeaway today is I've validated that I could pretty much do anything I really want to. So whether it's $9 billion TAM or $200 billion TAM, like not just the confidence, but the hindsight of knowing how to do it. If I had that hindsight, then I would have operated very differently. I think that the two things I've learned is, one, focus is such an important commodity. And while there are so many cool things you can do, each one of those things takes away from the thing that matters. The second is persistence trumps talent. Like if you're focused and you're persistent, you're probably more likely to be successful than somebody who's really talented and is going to give up a little earlier. Most entrepreneurs fail because they just don't want to do it anymore. That's really what it comes down to. They just don't want to fucking do it. They're over it. They're burnt out and they just don't want to keep pushing. So those two things for sure. And then, I mean, on the team front, so far my gut has been right like every single time. And anytime I've ignored it, it's been, especially when it comes to hiring talent, firing talent, those are things where I just don't ignore it anymore. And I'm
Trust the voice.
yeah. So I think for that, quality of the talent and the quality of the human I'd rather have somebody who wants to be here that is less experienced and less talented than somebody who's extremely talented, has all the tenure and all the accolades and network, but is an asshole. Like
Couldn't
they're
agree more.
not, like they're both like, so far some of our most the best hires we made, the MVPs of Wrapify are the folks that have had the least amount of experience.
You're reminding me of for Return on Courage, I interviewed Roger Martin. You know Roger, he's based here. He was in like the IP team at Qualcomm, and
Oh, okay.
and he's just a cool dude, man. And I think he is retired and doing his thing, doing his next thing. But I remember interviewing Roger on the Qualcomm campus. So like, let's just break that down. Always good to have a campus, right? Like if you have a campus, you're doing something
Yeah.
well. There's
Yeah.
money. And he reminded me that he's like, look, people see a campus and then they're not paying attention, to your point, on focus on the right things. And he's going house on fire, house on fire. And in his words, he basically said, you know how some of the people and the executives felt about him when he's going house on fire, like, Roger, like you're messing with the culture, like, shh, calm, things are clearly fine here. And when I talk about why there's a need for courage, it's very much problem solution. And on the problem side, there's this business apocalypse that's real. And in that section, Roger talks about, he loves zombie movies. And he said, the zombie apocalypse is the business apocalypse. It's these slow moving zombies that we never take seriously and we roll our eyes at, that eventually comes and gets us. And he says in every zombie movie, it's not the police that take the zombies down. The hubris was there, right? Like you finally call the police and the zombies had already taken over, and the lights swinging in the scene in the movie, and the phones are down. It's always the plumber and the PE teacher. And it's the new breed that don't have to unlearn the rules. There's an openness to take on the rules. And when you talk about talent, I think it's the same thing. It's like, are you open and willing to unlearning? And like a lot of times in my career, I've worked with like they've got the logos, they've worked at those companies, and it's like, and there's an arrogance that comes with that. I'm like, no, like you're only as good as the thing you're working on, and like roll up your sleeves and get to work. So I so agree with you that are you open? Are you willing? What do you need to unlearn, frankly? And are you a team player? I, and I get it. I come from the other advertising world, which is more the creative side of the house, where you used to get away. You could be a jerk, a talented jerk. I don't think those days exist anymore.
No, information, the travel, the speed of information travel, and it just, you can't do that anymore, right? Like social media has completely changed that. I mean, right now, like for example, 20 years ago, if I wanted to get an opinion on somebody in a new hire in New York in the media space, like that, the speed to which that information moves and the ability to get that information before you make that hire was really contingent on how strong your network was there, right? Whereas now, like I could ping you and like two other people and probably get an opinion on anybody in New York in media, right?
Yeah, the
Instantly.
Kevin Bacon game has never been faster.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, yeah, you can't deal with that. I mean, and yeah, especially having two girls now, like my lens for that is very different. Rapify is now mostly female. If you look at like our headcount, that didn't happen intentionally. It's the way things have shaken out. So I have a very different lens on like, what happens in business. But yes, the Mad Men era of media like can't exist anymore.
How old are the girls?
My youngest just turned 1, and our oldest will turn 3 in November.
How has that short circuited you as you take on this role?
I think it has made me a better operator and a better leader. Um, I will say that like the early stage startup grind and bringing two babies into the world, like that would have been I don't see how that would have worked. I know people have made it work, but like for example, I used to do LinkedIn lives and do a lot more content, right? Now I don't do that as much. I have to like force myself to partially because I would rather just spend time with my kids. I'd rather spend time with my kids than like spend hours at night writing content or, editing video or whatever. So not to say that it's not important. It's just I have to be more conscientious and think about it more. But yeah, the way I manage people, manage team, um, those are all like my lens for it is different. That now being father.
My honest take on there's two like big takeaways for me in this. One is on the space and one is on this convo. Like I am very grateful that I have a boy and a girl. And growing up a boy, we kind of know what that's like, right? You have an idea what that's like. My son is very sweet. He's like an old soul. I grew up, being a caveman. I would assume that he would be just like me, like no, not at all. Like he wants to build Legos. He still plays soccer, but he does it not necessarily because he's like crazy competitive like me and has a will to dribble down the sideline and score goals. He does it because his friends play. And that's like that's the lesson that I needed to hear. But my daughter, it's such a different, like it's an upside down world. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh my God, the empathy that I have now is so different
yeah,
than
that's the key word for
bumbling through
sure.
life, you know? And then the other thing, because I'm still in the land of content, right? I'm still up making content. I'm writing Weekly Dose of Courage, and I justify that behavior for me as I'm so locked on like what I believe my purpose to be, and it's just as important to try to find my people in the world who want to push like us as it is. I want my kids to see what courage looks like because I want them to go live an adventure and go live a courageous life. And even if one of the two of them goes an adventure and reports back on what they learn, hugely that's a victory. So I have to live it. And yes, it's expensive to live here. So if daddy's on the road all the time, what's the lesson? There's always a lesson. I'm trying to be intentional on the lessons now that they're picking up, and I'm far from perfect, right? But like there's lessons that you try to drop that hopefully they take the good from and eventually apply.
Totally. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Those are the two big shifts, right? My empathy muscle is way stronger than it ever was. And I think about things different. Like my brother and I, who's also a new father, he's got an almost 2-year-old. He works here at Wrapify. Um, we in the early days of Wrapify, we had parents that had young kids, and when we had, like, for example, we had an employee that like constantly was having issues with childcare, not being able to, and having to like work from home. And our attitude towards it then was like, oh, great. Like he can't come into the office today. And like today it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we were like that. I know, like, I can't believe we we have so much more empathy and sympathy for it because we've lived it. When you don't live it and you're just like, oh man, this guy can't freaking handle his personal life. How can he handle his, professional life? The reality is you got that's way more important. And then also, yeah, that leading by example. Like I want to do things in front of my daughters because they're absorbing everything I do in front of them. And to freakishly too, like they'll recall stuff that happened a year ago, and I'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're even paying attention to that. And they'll start, they'll start emulating or saying it or doing something like it. Yeah.
My son yesterday, I wrote my book. My book's been out since 19. It's not like it just came out, right? And he picks up my book and he goes, "Aw." He's 10, by the way, and he comes over and he goes, "Thanks." I'm like, "What?" And first line in the book is this. This is written for my kids. And I think it's the first time he's seen that or process that, or at least clearly articulated it to me. And it's like, oh my gosh, like there's still meaning to be had, which is cool when you see that sort of things. All right, coming down the home stretch here, there's a famous proverb that fear and courage are kin. Like you don't get to the courageous move without channeling it through fear. And when I what I think I know about you and even what you shared today, I don't sense a lot of fear. Like you said, there's confidence in on where you are, but you've got new challenges too, right? And so I'm curious, what are you afraid of? Like in the business, is there something is there a fear for you that you're coping with, you feel comfortable sharing?
So for me, I think like going back to like starting Wrapify and then where we are today, I got so comfortable with failure early on in my life from having like learning disabilities and all that kind of stuff that I just kind of like got numb to failure. Like failure as being a thing that you're afraid of. Because school, like our school system kind of teaches you to be afraid of failure, which I think is so counterintuitive for business. Um, Failure is like a huge teacher. That's how I learn. I learn by like I failed and I understand causation. Why did I fail? And I have a more physical reaction to it. But going back to like what am I afraid of right now? It's wasting time because it's becoming so much more scarce. Like it's such a like the thought of how much time I have like on this planet, how much time I have with my kids at this stage, how much time I have to do what we need to do at Wrapify this quarter. Like all of those things, I think that's like the biggest, I'd say, fear motivator. It's more fear being used as a tool to keep you going at the pace you need to go. So almost look at more like a whip um, than like a guillotine. So that's kind of how I conceptualize fear. It's like I really don't want to waste time.
And isn't it amazing how there's certain concepts that you can't knock and they keep coming back and you keep thinking about them? You're taking time to think about time and it's not going away. And so I think a good place to end is, and again, this is the optimist in me, right? Like I can't wait to see you in 8 years from now. I really can't. It's going to be exciting as your friend to sort of see where you are on the journey, what you do next. Because I'll just throw. I don't see there not being a next. Knowing you, I'm not saying you're going to go build a $200 billion. I mean, whatever it is, it could. But as you kind of apply all the things you've learned, even on the purpose side, like that's something that really like gets your soul going. And I'm not trying to play Inception here or self-fulfilling prophecy, but you always have a friend. We'll kind of end where we started. I'm always going to root for you, and it's. I even love the way you chose to end today. That failure is a huge teacher, and I wish more people were comfortable not bearing that, because that's what we usually do. Is we don't even address it. We suppress the failure versus using it as an opportunity to go, oh, hey, thank you. Learning opportunity. What did I, right? The problem is when we don't learn from the opportunity and we think the mistake is so big and we never touch the stove again. Well, maybe don't touch the stove. You get the idea, though, what I'm saying here. All right, last
You had to
words. What
touch
do you
the
got
stove
for
once
us?
though, right? You
Huh?
had to touch the stove once.
Well, and again, like that's part of the problem is that people aren't even curious of the stove anymore. Right? I think our people are, right? And I guess that's what I'm saying. What's the next stove you're going to touch? And I look forward to having you back on in about 8 years, and we'll see what that is.
Well, I
Thanks for
really
coming on,
appreciate you
James.
having me.
All
Thanks,
right,
Ryan.
last words. What do you got? You got one last final little bow for us?
Yeah, I think we're going through the hard times create good men phase, and men and women. I think the generation right now that's going through the hard times will be what shape the future leaders of the world. And I think that we need to be consciously aware of that. So going back to whether you're a parent, a leader, any of those things, this is a really important period of time for humans. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about what we're able to change and do in the next couple of years because it's going to set the course of a lot of things to come.
I think my last final take is the power of no is something I take from this, because I think in certain places, no isn't no. No is not right now, like when it comes to raising money and staying resilient on that. And as times change, ideas might look different. And it's on the leader to go, no, I'm not ready to quit. And I also think the other no that I took away from this call or this podcast was, no, I need to focus on these three things, and I have to say no to this, that, and the other. And knowing when to say no to something, stay laser focused on the things you need to focus on. So just the power of no as an optimist, I still think is it is saying yes to certain things too.
Sure.
And so, all right, man, be good. Great to see you, James. Keep rolling.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.